Hi again, everybody. Chris VanMeter here. Do another versus video. This time I'm playing against good friend Kenny Caster. We're going to smash him a good one. Let's take a look at this sweet deck that we've got. This is actually from this last double standard open weekend in Dallas. Aaron Barrick actually won on Sunday and then top eighted on the Saturday with the exact same 75. And it's a really unique deck. So let's delve right in and take a look. So first glance, we just have this sweet Naya aggressive deck. And if anybody was like me that last weekend when we saw that deck list, I actually went back and forth multiple times looking for Burning Tree Emissary and Flinthoof Boar. They're not here. So let's take a look at why. So we have Experiment 1 and Dried Militant to start off our curves at the 1-drop. Experiment 1, just a very good creature. It grows very quickly. It's resilient, lives through Wrath of God. Dried Militant is a little unique. So Militant is awesome in this deck because it's playable off of any one of our lands that come into play untapped. So it's playable off of Sacred Foundry and Stomping Ground or Temple Garden, unlike the Experiment 1. But it also plays a unique role where it makes it so these Snapcaster Mage decks aren't able to catch back up to us once they Wrath. So once they use their few spot removal spells before they have to Wrath our board away, then their Snapcaster Mages are just terrible 2/1s as we get to the mid to late game, and they're not able to get value off of it, which is really what we just want to do, is put on pressure, make their good cards not as good, and then kill them. Along the same lines, we have Stringroot Geist and Voice of Resurgence as our 2-drops. So instead of playing Burning Tree Emissary and Flinthoof Boar, we have these very resilient, very disruptive cards. So Stringroot Geist allows us to continue to put on pressure and has haste, similar to Flinthoof Boar did, but Stringroot Geist is always going to live through a Supreme Verdict, and it can even double up on evolving our Experiment 1 if we happen to have one in play and they have to kill our Stringroot Geist. Now, Voice of Resurgence is Dragon's Maze standout. Price tag actually matches how good the card is, surprisingly. So even though it is $40, you get your money's worth. It's a very aggressive 2/2 that can put damage on your opponent. It makes it so that they just don't want to play spells on your turn, which is usually the best time for them to play their spells. So we're making them play our game instead of their game. Also, the token that you get when he dies can get just huge. Like we have 8 1-drops, we have 2-drops and 3-drops, and the token can also evolve our Experiment 1, so it just again continues to allow us to put on pressure with our opponent while being resilient. Unlike Burning Tree Emissary and Flinthoof Boar, like we have Stain Power, so those cards are very good at just jumping out of the gate, punching your opponent really hard, really fast, but once they kind of stop you, you just have these terrible 2/2s and 3/3s, whereas these two creatures are very resilient and continue to put on pressure once they actually have something. Now, along the same lines of that, since we're not just wanting to dump all of our hand onto the field, we can play some very powerful 3-drops to follow up our 2-drops. So Smiter and Boros Reckoner are very good as far as like a 4/4 and a 3/3 for their mana cost. Reckoner has the added ability of being able to just attack through anything basically. And Loxodon Smiter is uncounterable. So a lot of times against these control decks, they're playing like 1 or 2 syncopates just to try and get somebody. And when they do, it puts them way far ahead. So we can go a 1-drop into a 2-drop and then safely play our Smiter and just strand the syncopate in their hand, because from that point on, they're going to have to tap out to handle our threats. Then the syncopate just won't do anything. Gore-Clan Rampager is just a good card, 4 mana for a 4/4, but allows us to push through damage and kill our opponents once we get to that mid to late game, and plays very well with our 2-drops, so Stringroot Geist and Voice of Resurgence. Geist is always going to be there, always going to continue attacking, so we're always going to have a target for that Gore-Clan Rampager. And Voice of Resurgence, if we rampage something to try and push through damage and they have an answer for it, they might kill our guy and try and outvalue us, but we're still going to get that token off of the Voice of Resurgence when we're using our Rampager. Now, Advent of the Worm is an interesting card. So you might notice the lack of Hellrider at a 4-drop. So Hellrider and these types of decks are traditionally very, very good creatures. Unfortunately, without having Burning Tree Emissary, we can't cheat and only have 1 red mana source in play when we want to cast our Hellrider. So only having 4 lands that produce red mana make it very tough for us to cast Hellrider. So we're going to go with Advent of the Worm. Now, it's a 5/5 at instant speed that's great, has trample already. In addition to that, it helps us to level up our Experiment 1s to get them to a 5/5. It doesn't happen very often, but it can. And Advent of the Worm also plays very well with like our Gore-Clan Rampager and our Boros Charm. So a lot of times we'll put pressure on our opponent. They'll Wrath us on 4, tapping out. we can make an Advent of the Worm and then just like hit them for 9 or 10 damage out of nowhere with a Boros Charm or a Gore-Clan Rampager and just end the game. Now once we get into this other row here with some spells, again, Boros Charm, very good card, lets us push through damage, very good with like our big creatures, Advent of the Worm. It's also good against like Supreme Verdict, so if we play a couple aggressive 1-drops, a couple aggressive 2-drops that are also disrupting our opponent, at some point they're going to have to Supreme Verdict, and we can stop it with Boros Charm. It's great. Searing Spear pushes through damage. A lot of times we're going to get our opponent to like 6, 7 life, maybe 8 life, and just some combination of these cards will end up killing the opponent. Now, only having 2 Rancors does seem a little weird, and I feel like it is probably the worst card in the deck, but I'm going to take Aaron's word for it, and we're going to give it a shot. It does play very well with Voice of Resurgence, so a lot of times Rancor, when you cast it on your creature, you run the risk of just getting blown out with the 2-for-1. So let's say we Rancor our Strangleroot Geist with a Voice of Resurgence in play. We either get a Rancor Strangleroot Geist, or we get a 3/2 Strangleroot Geist and an Elemental token. So at that point, it doesn't really seem like all that bad of a proposal. So we're going to give it a shot and try it out. As for the lands, 22 lands, not a whole lot. Another reason why we're just capping the curve basically at 3, with a couple of Advent of the Worms, got a couple basics, a bunch of shock lands. Again, we don't really care about damaging ourselves because we're just going to beat the crap out of our opponents with all of our creatures. So let's go ahead and take a look at the sideboard and see what kind of holes we're going to fill in the certain matches with those cards. Alrighty, well, welcome back. Let's take a look at the sideboard. I do feel like Aaron did a very good job with building his sideboard here for us, and we do have a lot of cards to handle, specific cards that we feel our opponents are going to have against us and will give us some trouble. So first off, up here at the top, we've got Mizium Mortars. These 2 cards are very good at killing opposing Loxodon Smiters, as well as it's also very good at killing like Restoration Angels and other just troublesome creatures that we might run into, like Flinthoof Boar, Frontline Medic, things like that. Ray Revelation is a nod to the Ban Hexproof decks. So Ban Hexproof is a very powerful player in the current meta right now, and a lot of people are continuing to play it, despite how inconsistent I feel it is. It still is just extremely powerful, like Blitz. And the best way for us to beat it is to race it, which isn't very possible when they have Unflinching Courage, but this stops it. So if we ever get into a racing point with Ban Hexproof, which is what we're going to aim for, our creatures all outclass theirs, and then as long as we can handle Unflinching Courage or just like a timely enchantment like a Spectral Fight or something that they're trying to push through damage with, then we just end up winning because they're basically all in on those cards. Now along the same lines as Ban Hexproof for enchantments, we have Volcanic Strength. So when we're playing against a deck similar to ours, we can just Volcanic Strength one of our creatures and kill them. It quickly puts the creature out of Searing Spear range, so if we put it on like a Loxodon Smiter becomes a 6/6, a Reckoner becomes a 5/5, Voice of Resurgence becomes a 4/4. Like it just very quickly makes our creatures bigger than their removal spells, and then it's unblockable, so we just continue to attack every turn and they die. Skullcrack is mainly to combat Sphinx's Revelation. So, I mean, all of the control decks, be it Esper, Blue, White, Red, Bant, they're all going to have Sphinx's Revelation, and this is the best way for us to stop it. They might be able to draw into a bunch of cards, but we're going to have quite a bit of burn post-board against those decks, and as long as we can stop them from gaining 5 or 6 life from a Revelation, we'll be able to punch through the last few points of damage to win. Now, Skullcrack, strange enough, kind of goes hand in hand with Pacifism. So Pacifism is an awesome answer for us against Boros Reckoner. So Reckoner is a very difficult card for aggressive decks to handle. Pacifism allows us to just stop it. So we can pacify the Reckoner, continue to attack. We can also pacify other creatures like Loxodon Smiter or Flinthoof Boar. So it's definitely good against those cards as well. But a lot of people will want to use Pacifism as an answer to Thragtusk, which is very, very bad. So a lot of times you're just going to Pacifism your opponent's Thragtusk, think you're safe, and then get blown out by a Restoration Angel. I feel like the best way for us to handle the Thragtusk decks is to just utilize Skullcrack as a way to stop them from gaining the life, which then allows us to continue to attack, trade a creature with their Thragtusk, maybe even trade another creature with the token. Doesn't matter, we're still getting in damage, and they're not gaining the life. That's the biggest part of Thragtusk against us. Boros Charm is also very good against the Sphinx's Revelation decks, as a way to counter their Supreme Verdicts, but it also allows us to just push through damage. 4 to their Dome is great. You can use it to kill a Planeswalker like Sorin or Jace Architect of Thought, as well as, you know, sometimes just giving your guys double strike. Again, Advent of the Worm being able to do 10 damage out of nowhere when your opponent's tapped out. It's pretty sweet, and I can't wait to see if I can make it happen. So again, we're going to be playing against Kenny today. I feel like his deck is pretty well matched up against mine, but let's go ahead and do some battling.